Hi everyone, we're here today with Bruna Kalinoski, my good friend from Osgood, to discuss the in-firm interview process. Bruna and I met during the LLM and we went through the accreditation and licensing process together, and she was my go-to person when I was applying. So her insights are going to be very useful for whoever is in the process now. Welcome, Bruna.
Thanks for inviting me, Yana.
So most of you who are in the process of interviewing know that the first stage of landing a summer position, which is the entry-level job that will lead you to articling and to being hired as a first-year associate, starts with OCIs. So OCIs are the on-campus interviews that if you're successful, you will be invited for the in-firm stage. So under normal circumstances, that would mean that you would be invited to meet the lawyers at the firm that you were successful with during your OCI process. And normally that would include you being assigned a host and then showing up at the law firm and then that host taking you to meet 3 different lawyers. This process is not happening during the pandemic, and these interviews are switched to being virtually. Despite the fact that these interviews might be virtually, the questions that you will receive and the lawyers that you will be meeting will not change that much. So today I want to discuss with Bruna the questions that we received during in-firms and what's the best way to answer them to maximize your chances in landing a summer position.
One of the things that I think it's very important for everyone to understand is that the different stages of this recruitment process. So for example, sending out your applications with your resume, cover letter, and transcript, and being invited for the OCI interviews, and then later the in-firm interviews. These different stages in the recruitment process, they will focus on different things. So it's okay if during your first experience going through this process, you're likely not going to master every single nuance from the different stages. So you might be super successful in sending out great applications with your resume and very interesting cover letters that will help you get invited for many interviews. However, the next step of this process is getting called for the OCI interviews or the in-firm interviews. And it's okay if you end up not doing that well during the interviews or during the OCIs, because it's going to be fine if your interviews don't work out necessarily for that year, because there will always be the next year for you to apply again and fix those things that you think didn't go well in the past year. And I think this is one of the things that happened, at least to me. It was part of my experience going through the recruitment process during my first year and failing the recruitment process during the first year and understanding where I failed and what I could have done differently. And that was crucial for me to be successful in my following year during the recruitment process. And most of the people that I speak to, they went through the same thing and they were able to secure a number of interviews. But then during the interview, they were feeling nervous or overwhelmed, or, for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And it's okay, because interviews can be overwhelming, but don't think that because one interview didn't work out, or because you said something that you shouldn't have said, or if you feel like, oh, I wasn't born for interviewing, or, things like that, don't get discouraged. And there are very simple things that you can try to understand about the interviewing process that will help you become more comfortable with interviews in the future.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more, because I had the same experience. I applied the first year. It didn't work out. I thought that I had the perfect application package. And when it didn't work out, instead of saying, this is not for me, I had to go through all the things that were potentially missing from my application. And the year in between, it helped me to create the resume that was required for me to land an interview. That may include publications or completing the LLM. Because let's face it, some people come with more experience. And if you move to Canada and you cannot show examples of things that you have successfully completed in Canada, that may be an obstacle to you landing a position. So if things don't work out, don't be discouraged. Use that year in a fruitful way. Try to grow as much as you can. Try to grow your network. Try to improve your resume. Try to do some internships that can help you show skills that would be transferable for your future positions. And next year, your chances will probably be higher. Bruna, what do you consider to be your key blind spots that led you to to not succeed during your first recruitment process?
This is a great question, and I get that a lot. As I said, a lot of people think that because we were successful in securing a really great position, that we are naturals interviewing and being in this type of situation. But of course, that's not the case. It's hard for everyone. It was hard for me as well. And I remember vividly from my first interviews that in trying to answer the interviewer's questions, I would focus on the type of answer that, was just in my head. And it was like a truthful answer. I wasn't really concerned with what the interviewing was looking for. I'll give you an example. Because I'm from a different jurisdiction and I got my law degree from Brazil, I would very often be asked the question, well, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the similarities between the Brazilian legal system and the Canadian legal system? And I remember that I would, instead of answering the question and focusing on the similarities, which was exactly what they asked and exactly what they were interested in knowing, I would truthfully say, well, the systems are very different. Brazil is a civil law system and Canadian is a common law system. And I think it's more different than similar. I don't think there are a lot of similarities. So my answer to the interviewer questions was wrong for two reasons. Reason number one is actually there are a lot of similarities. And I just wasn't aware of those similarities because it was too early on for me during the process. I was at the very beginning of my LLM program. I didn't quite appreciate how many similarities there were and how close the two legal systems were. And I wasn't able to elaborate on those similarities. Reason number two why my answer was wrong is because the interviewers are interested in understanding what are your transferable skills, what is your transferable knowledge, in what ways your previous experience, both like educational and work experience, will make you a better candidate than the other candidates. So it doesn't really help for you to focus on the differences between your home jurisdiction system and the Canadian system. It's always more helpful for them to understand and learn about all the similarities. This is exactly what they want to know, because if you help them understand the similarities, they will understand that there are a lot of transferable skills that you will bring to the table.
Yeah, and essentially cultivate trust. So Bruna, I'd like you to elaborate a bit on what do you think that you did during that 1 year from your first recruitment process to the second that you think that helped you land essentially an interview and a position?
So the second time I went through the recruitment process, I felt more prepared. And the reason why I felt more prepared was because number one, I had at that time completed my LLM program. So I was fully accredited in terms of being ready to start the licensing process with the Law Society. And that boosted my confidence for sure. The second reason why I felt more prepared was because during that year, I had the opportunity to complete 2 different internships. So I had a better understanding of what law firms are looking for when they're recruiting candidates. And because I had the opportunity to meet more people and to hear from more people about the profession and about the expectations that lawyers have when they're connecting with students and recruiting students, I think that gave me a lot more insight into how I should approach my own interviews for the following year. So networking was important. Having my 2 internships was very important. And completing my LLM program at Osgood was very important. So those 3 things gave me a lot more confidence when I was going through the recruitment process for the second time.
I couldn't agree more. Speaking from experience, having completed internships with the firms that will potentially hire you as a summer or as an articling student gives you the confidence that you can do the work. Because coming from a different jurisdiction, you always ask yourself, what am I going to be asked to do? Is it going to be different? You kind of question your own skills. So having worked in a similar setting can help you build that confidence, and you present yourself in a different way during the interviews. And again, networking is also very important, because having a year to build your network and potentially ask them to review your application package is also a very important element of the hiring process. I'm sure, Bruna, you had the same experience as I did. The first year I just applied, I maybe asked a friend to take a look at my application and I just submitted it. The second year I approached it in a totally different way. I asked recruiters to review my application or people that will be in a position to hire me. And they slightly changed the way I expressed some things, maybe to showcase my leadership skills or things that made me be considered as a top candidate. Because you may have the experience, but the way you showcase it is very important. And having those people slightly change your application is crucial to being at least invited for the first interview. Then it's up to you how you impress them.
I think one of the things that makes the candidates nervous for in-firm interviews and OCI interviews is that they fail to understand the importance of their cover letter and their resume and their transcripts, and the fact that their application package is so crucial for showing that they have the right qualifications for the job. So because they don't consider that the cover letter, resume, and their application package is that important, they go to the interviews thinking that they have to make a lot of effort to impress. I think it's important for candidates to understand that whatever is listed in your resume and cover letter and what your transcripts from law school show, that you were a competent student and that you were, that you're a good candidate. One of the things that helped me the most with the interview process was to understand that my cover letter, my resume, and my application package was adequate. And because it was adequate and because it was good and because it looked good, I was invited over for in-firm interviews. So I think it's important for candidates to appreciate that once they are invited over for interviews, it's because they've already impressed the employer with their abilities, with their work experience, and with their grades. So it's your application package that will cause a first good impression on the employer. So it's very important for you to try to gather feedback on your application package. So your cover letter and resume, because those two documents are going to be key for you to secure as many interviews as possible with the firms that you're interested. So collecting feedback on your application is crucial. And it's also crucial to understand who you're asking to review your application, right, Yona? You want to make sure that the firms that you're really, really keen, they don't see you in the process of elaborating your documents, right? So you have to have other people help you in this process.
Absolutely. I advise students to definitely collect feedback on their application. But what I'm not stressing enough that I think I should is be selective on the people that you choose for this role. One, because you cannot do this with someone you haven't established a connection with and that they haven't invited you to send them their application. You meeting someone over Zoom coffee and telling them, oh, by the way, here's my application. What do you think about it? It's not helpful. Second, as you said, Bruna, you really have to select the firms so that you don't send your application in the making to your top firm because they know the things that you changed and they helped you with that. They may not be as impressed as they would be if they just received the final product. So be selective, choose perhaps the second, third, or even the fifth or seventh firm in the way you have ranked them and the way you are choosing them just to review your application. Not necessarily only the recruiters, choose people that have worked in those firms and who perhaps may not be in a position to hire you, but understand the things that they had to change in their application. They can advise you the same. So don't burn bridges. That's the most important thing. Don't burn bridges.
Yes, I agree.
So now that we've mentioned how important it is to have a perfect application package and have it vetted by someone who's potentially going to hire you, it is also important to distinguish the application package from the role of the interview itself. So Bruna, do you want to share more about what the differences are?
Yes. So the application package, so your cover letter, resume, and transcripts are the documents that are going to cause that first great impression on the employer and will make them like you and will make you then interested in having you over and meeting you in person for an interview and working with you potentially. So if you are invited over for an interview, it's because they already like you. They already have a genuine interest in getting to know you and learning more about you as a person, as a professional. And what your application package tells the recruiter is that you are competent. You have the skills. You have the qualifications that they're looking for. So So you have all that it takes to do the job that they're recruiting for. So it's important to know that your application package is going to be sufficient for that purpose. That means that the role of the interview is to build a personal connection with the interviewers, with the people you're going to work with. They're not going to be testing you for your legal knowledge or your legal skills or your competence to do deep work or actual work, because those things are apparent already from your application. It's reflected in your work experience, in your grades from law school, volunteering experience, and in everything that you've listed and told them through your written documents. So this is the role of the application package, to show them that you have the qualifications and that you're competent for the job.